Welcome, everybody, to this panel discussion. I'm really excited about it. I was just joking earlier. They were here earlier, and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I have amazing questions. Today's topic for this amazing panel is the business side of Bitcoin mining. So the first question that I would like to start off with is understanding our audience. So how many of you guys are currently Bitcoin mining right now? Okay. How many of you are Bitcoin mining at scale, more than just being a pleb miner or at-home miner? Okay, excellent, excellent. How many of you guys have been mining at scale for over 3 years? Raise your hand. Bitcoin mining at scale for over 3 years. Raise your hand. Okay, couple. 5 years? The hand up. Okay, so only one. Excellent, perfect. That helps set me up for my first question. But before that, I want to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with the one closest to me.
Okay.
Tell us about who you are, what you're all about, and then we'll move on.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Margot Paez. I'm a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, and I'm also a PhD candidate at the Georgia Institute of Technology. I do research on Bitcoin mining, in particular on the energy and environmental impacts, and I am we have a report that we published in July about Bitcoin mining, load flexibility, and that the impact on reducing emissions. And it's also part of my PhD thesis. So very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Hello, my name is Fredrick Barber. I'm the founder of CrewCryptoCombo.com. I also run a small solar business called Echo Solar Systems. I've been into Bitcoin for about 12 years. Had my son GPMU mining a few years back. He built his first very small mine. And since then, in other years, literally in war zones, I've studied about Bitcoin, took some courses. And now I'm about having the interesting conversations and the tough conversations to ensure the viability and decentralization of the Bitcoin network.
My name is Alex Schoephoerster. I'm an attorney at Moss & Barnett. I'm primarily business practice and estate planning. So tomorrow I'll share a little bit more about that. But in my spare time, I also am the co-founder and president of the Minnesota Crypto Council, where we host different seminars and educational events, trying to help newcomers to this space understand what this is all about. We also do some presentations for businesses, as well as some roundtables and things for legislators. So trying to cover the three bases of individuals, businesses, and government to help them learn about what this new industry is.
Awesome. So let's jump into some questions. So when it comes to the business of Bitcoin mining, you guys have been around Bitcoin mining long enough. You've probably earned your scars and your stripes for doing so. And so my first question, we'll start with Margot. First question is, when it comes to the business of Bitcoin mining, what's the most valuable lesson that you've learned in your experience of Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, I'm a researcher. The most I would say that I've actively mined has been Monero or a meme coin. So personally, my perspective is from the research policy side. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is the importance of engaging stakeholders where they're at and acknowledging their concerns and working with them within that framework. So when I first got into this, actively within this particular position at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, there was still a narrative of really pushing back in terms of the environmental impacts that was dominating the discourse. And I've found that this was feeding in very much into the negative narrative around Bitcoin mining. So one of the things that I really tried to do was to convince people and to show them within the industry that it's better to say yes and. So to say, yes, we understand that you're concerned about climate change. And look, here's what we're doing to help. So for me, I think that that is one of the biggest lessons that I've taken away, and that I think and hope that the industry really takes away from this, is to be cooperative as much as possible, and try to also use your data to put yourself on the offense.
I believe the biggest thing I've learned about Bitcoin mining, and this is not a plug, but it's just the truth. I did a mining course with the sponsor, Bitcoin Mining World, right when it was Scott's Mining. And you immediately learn that managing your load, the electricity that's involved, it's going to drive how you mine. And coupled with that is individual grit. You know, many times people think that the number of degrees you have drives whether or not you're going to be successful. In this business, it's about grit. So whether you're using a hydroelectric dam, you're building a solar field, using uh, biomass, you're sticking the miner in the bottom of the sear tower to heat it during the winter. People figure out ways to get electricity, stranded electricity or not, into those miners and turn that into an economic benefit for their families. And at the end of the day, if you may remain resilient, then you're going to set your team up for success and your mining operation up for success.
Maybe not the most fun part of Bitcoin mining, but for me as the attorney, of course, I'm going to focus on a little bit of the legal aspect. And so from my perspective, just keeping in mind that this is a business and we need to be thinking about it as a business. Now, it's one thing if you are pleb mining, you got a miner or two in your basement or whatever, I'm probably not too worried about it. But as you do look at scale, are we properly set up? Do we have an LLC in place? What's our management structure? What's our custodial solution? You know, how are all of these things interacting? If we have employees, do we have our insurance policies and things like that that we need to have in place? So just making sure that we understand and realize this is a business and we do actually need to treat it like a business.
Awesome. Next question. And I like to be pragmatic. So this next question, we'll start with Margot as well. In terms of the business of Bitcoin mining, what is something that a business operator must understand to begin Bitcoin mining?
What must a business operator
Understand
to begin
to begin
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin mining? I mean, there's so many different reasons and rationale as to why people go into Bitcoin mining. They think there's an economic opportunity.
Yeah.
They think it's cool. There's this meme coin called Shiba Shitcoin Inu, right? Yeah, like that's why people go into it. But there's also legitimate reasons. So I'm curious.
Well,
When it comes to the business of Bitcoin mining, what is one thing that every Bitcoin miner should know before they get in?
it's hard. I would say it's hard. I mean, I have looked, I have seen and talked to many people in the industry. I watched the hash price. I mean, you have to really plan when you enter into this industry, when you're buying your machines, and you really need a 4-year outlook, I think, because if you're not prepared for the bear markets, you're not going to make it. And this industry is about being the most efficient operator out there. So if you want to get into this, I think you have to have this mindset of running the most efficient operation you can in all areas, both in the capital expenses side, but also in the operational side.
So you need to know cash flow.
Yeah, definitely.
Flow is king.
Yeah, and you got to decide, like, are you going to debt finance this, or what are you going to do, and what does that mean? Are you going to start doing a strategic reserve like Marathon? What are going to be your secondary sources of income to get you through those dry spells when the hash rate is very low, right? You have to really think ahead and be as prepared as possible, I think, anyway.
I love it. I think it's absolutely important that we talk about the real around the realities of Bitcoin mining. I think too many have gone into Bitcoin mining and they thought it was easy. Just you plug in a miner, right? And then we print something. But there's a lot more work to it. What would you say, sir?
Wow, she answered the question. It's fantastic, right? Good job.
Thanks.
I think one of the things you should know, and I should say this as a commander, acknowledge the things that you don't know. So you line up 10 people and you fill up a glass halfway and you say, it's a glass half empty or half full. And we all get taught to say the half of the glass is full. Well, in my old line of business, we address half the glass is empty. Have a contingency plan. If something goes wrong, who's your go-to guy? If I don't understand how electricity works and I don't have hair, but I don't want to get myself blasted, right? So acknowledge the things you don't know. I am not a legal expert, right? But I'm pretty sure by listening to your voice just then, I've heard you while driving down the highway speak. You on Scott's mining Were you ever on Scott's mining mastermind class one time?
I don't know if I have been, but I've had several conversations
Okay.
with him. Yeah.
I listened to that conversation and I realized, well, wait a minute, hold up. Here are some things that I need to put in my kit bag. And then when it's showtime, I can cover A, B, and C. And then maybe the next two people can cover the other corners of the room that I can't see to make it a successful operation for the team.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off both yours because very good answers. I mean, I think the economics, right? If you're not making money, you know, what are you in this for? And I'm going to circle back to that as well. But understanding the asset that you own too, and I'm sure you guys have done research on Bitcoin and understand what it is, but I think that's certainly an important piece as well as far as kind of thinking about getting into this industry. And then again, circling back, it's the why. Why are you doing this? Is it just because you want to make money? Is it because you want to secure the network? Is it because this reason or that reason you've got some kind of niche expertise that you can apply that, you know, you can have an advantage over other miners, or, you know, what's your why? And I think really understanding that, because to Margot's point, I mean, bear markets can be brutal. And if you don't have a plan and you don't understand kind of at the core of why you're doing this, it's going to be challenging to survive.
Yeah, so I wanted to start off the panel with these relatively generic ideas because I know that you guys are coming from completely different industries, you know, legal, policy, you know, you're an operator, etc. But now I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of your specific industry knowledge. We'll start with you, sir. From the legal standpoint, is it harder today to become a Bitcoin miner because of the legal constraints and legal hurdles, or is it easier today to start Bitcoin mining? Give us your perspective.
It's a good question. So I don't know if you guys saw Gary Gensler just made a comment that Bitcoin miners might be securities. If that's taken seriously, it's
Not
a lot
happening.
harder.
Not happening.
Yeah. But that would make it a lot harder, certainly. I don't know. I think it's going to depend at a federal level within the United States. There hasn't been a lot of change that would be specific to Bitcoin mining. There's been talk about, you know, an excise tax on the industry or things like that. I'm not aware of any of that has passed right now. There are some more local areas that are certainly more friendly to the industry, but a lot of it is not like it's formal legislation and like you can look from the outside and understand. It's once you get under the hood and you start working with folks, whether it's city council or county boards or things like that. We've got an industry that there is a perception, at least from some people, that, you know, this is an evil technology and Bitcoin is bad and I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And when you get one of those people at a local level that's in a position of power, it's going to be hard to mine or do anything within the industry within that locality. And so I think it really ends up being a little bit more granular, where you just need to find people that actually either support the industry or at least are open to learn about it, because that seems to be the biggest challenge. Is when people get their mindset, they're not even willing to have the conversation with you and learn what it's about. And I mean, just as an example, here in town, obviously you guys will have the opportunity to go visit Kitty Hawk, but it takes a lot of conversations with local regulators, city councils, boards, things like that, to get a scaled operation up and running.
So a follow-up question that from the legal perspective. Did it dial me? Okay. From a legal perspective, should a new Bitcoin miner consult legal immediately in the beginning, or is this something that can be deferred later? Because I get a lot of
earlier is always better, assuming it's good counsel that you have, right? So when you come and talk to a lawyer, there should be kind of, if there's 7 things that they want you to do, there should be a list or a priority on those. So, hey, maybe it's 1 or 2 things you need to do right away. But obviously with any startup, right, cash flow is always a question, and trying to understand, okay, what can we wait on? What can we figure out later? And the additional nuance I would add there is depending on what scale you're looking at. So if you're looking at, for example, if you're looking at taking money from any investor, that needs to be, you got to talk to legal before you accept a single dollar. I mean, at that point, now you are selling, you're issuing securities. Lots of regulations, as you guys have probably heard, on securities and issuing securities. So, you know, if you are a larger operator, or you want to start a large several megawatt facility or bigger, you know, that's definitely early on. If you just want to start and you're going to put 10 miners, you know, in your basement or at your office or some spare room or something like that, probably something you can jump in and get started and have a conversation as you look at growing.
Awesome. Let's move to Margot. I'm gonna ask you a simple question. When it comes to when it comes to the business of Bitcoin and operations, have the policies made it easier and the regulatory environment made it easier today to get into Bitcoin mining and the permutations of Bitcoin mining, or are we seeing some constraining elements to the growth of Bitcoin mining and the scale of Bitcoin mining? I'm curious about your perspective being in the policy arena.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think the answer is that it's heterogeneous in the sense that it really depends on which state you're looking at to do your mining. For example, in New York, they passed the crypto mining moratorium, which prevented any new operations to co-locate with natural gas plants. But that doesn't exclude you from being on grid using hydro or anything like, whatever the energy source is on grid doesn't exclude you from that. But it did create an environment of hostility because of the way that the legislation was enacted. On the other hand, there have been other states that have actually encouraged Bitcoin miners to come into town through tax incentives. And I believe one was Kentucky, possibly Wyoming, or Montana, and also definitely in Texas, especially with utilizing flared or stranded gas. So it really depends on the location. And I think if you are thinking about starting a new operation or finding a new location to house your miners, you really should do some due diligence, do some early research on what the political environment is where you're looking to site that facility, because you don't want to end up doing this massive investment in machines and equipment, and then next thing you know, the local legislator is passing a law that makes it very difficult for you to access the electricity in that jurisdiction. So I think that policy, it really depends. And at the federal level, it's not very clear yet, but there are movements even within the Democratic Party to try to make them more pro crypto in general. But where Bitcoin mining really falls into all of that, it's not that clear yet to me.
I've had conversations across the entire spectrum of the Bitcoin mining industry. And sometimes some of the questions are essentially permutations of, should I care about policy? Because it's such a lagging indicator in so many ways, and because of the regulatory cycle time of, proposing an idea to actually institutionalizing it can be months or years, is legislation, is policies, should that be something that Bitcoin mining operators are concerned with, or rather, is it something that they merely need to? I'm curious your perspective. I think the lawyer, you would say, no, you shouldn't be reactionary. You're probably too late. However, there's so much that's ephemeral in the policy arena. Is it something that Bitcoin mining operators should actually care?
I think so. I think it's important to always try to stay on the offensive as much as possible with what you're doing, because once you're put on the defensive, it's very easy for you to look bad. And I think Bitcoin miners have been mostly unprepared to deal with a lot of the negative news articles and the FUD that's been out there up to this point. And that's why, we're starting to see much stronger lobbying and stronger industry organizations going into DC in particular. And I think just the very fact that we had so many of the public companies send people over to meet with Donald Trump says a lot about what the industry is thinking about and whether they think policy matters. And I think the answer is yes, it does matter. And you should take into consideration, and also just, think about it from the perspective of your scale and what you plan to do in the long term.
So I always like to be pragmatic. Can you give us a site, a website, or a place for us to know where to go to understand the latest policies, regulatory compliance, all those considerations? Where should we go to find that information?
I think Satoshi Action is probably one of the better ones. I mean, the reason why in particular, I think, is because they go state by state. So if you want to know what's going on in your state, Dennis Porter's organization is probably the best one. And they're very keen to be working with the miners themselves, and they're always trying to get legislation passed that favors miners. So I would say that is my first choice in terms of that direct, face-to-face interaction with the policymakers. And then The blockchain councils in your state are probably also really helpful. The Texas Blockchain Council in particular works intensively with the policymakers in Texas, for example. So I think they're also a really great resource.
Awesome.
Can I add real quick as well? And I mean, you guys probably get this, but I would just want to add an important piece about why you should care. Obviously, in the business, there's a financial incentive that makes a difference. But otherwise, I mean, this is the government coming in and telling you what you can and can't do with your energy, right? And your electricity. And you've probably all heard stories about how much electricity Christmas lights use and YouTube use and your tumble dryers, and all those are more than the Bitcoin network. And it just doesn't seem like, it seems like a gross overreach for the government to be able to come in and affect a specific industry and say, hey, we don't like your use of energy. And so we're going to essentially shut it down or add some substantial tax or other regulation that's going to hinder the growth of your industry, when it's really not. It's not causing harm to anyone. If anything, it would be on the back end. There's been some issues with some miners in populated areas that create a lot of noise, right? Okay, well, yes, if you're violating a noise ordinance, okay, I get that. That's what should be regulated, not the Bitcoin mining itself.
Awesome. I have a question for all three of you. I'm going to throw it out here. In terms of Bitcoin mining, I'm going to oversimplify this model here, but in terms of Bitcoin mining, there's really 4 things that we need to be considered about. Give me peace. There's more than 4, but if we put it at a high level, right? It's infrastructure costs, it's land, it's power. And then the 4th is the variable cost of the spot price of Bitcoin, which makes us either profitable or non-profitable. So out of those 4, when it comes to Bitcoin infrastructure costs, power, and land, for you 3, what do you think we should start with? Should we start with the land? Should we start with the power? Or we should start with the money? Because these 3 considerations are always, I'm sure you guys have these conversations all the time. Some of you guys might be brokers. Some of you guys might have marketplaces. I'll tell you what we receive all the time is one of those 3, and it's absolutely confounding. Someone will come to me and say, I got land. I say, great. You need Bitcoin mining infrastructure. You need power. Someone will come to me and say, I got a substation. Well, you need infrastructure, you need legal, you need contracts, right? Some people will come to me and say, well, I have access to, I have lots of money. Well, then you need land and you need power and all this stuff. And so out of these 3, where would you start? Open question. Where should you start? Should you start at the land? Should you start at the power purchase agreement level? Or you should start with the money? I'm curious. When it comes to the business of Bitcoin and Bitcoin operations. Start with you.
Okay, for me, first of all, we know that all 3 are interconnected, right? They aren't mutually exclusive. But I'd probably start with both land and power simultaneously, if you will. And this is why. No matter what you do, we're mammals, and guess what? We need land to do anything that's out there. But in particular, if you have a piece of land, I'm looking at a few acres here in North Carolina now, and it's near the right power infrastructure, and you can link in, that's going to cut your cost way down. So it impacts the money side, right? We all know the further you are from the substation, right, the more it's going to cost you. The gauge is changed and everything else. Now, something that I'd also like to see about land, and everybody pull your pins out and write this down. There's a rural energy for America program, the REAP program, and it's under the USDA. The average person that gets a grant approved ends up getting about 114% ROI over 18 months. The way so back to the policy piece, right? Some of that policy is positive, but you have to be aware of it. Next door, there's a grant writer over there, and I'm 1,000% sure that they get about $25 to $30 million in grants approved every quarter. Some of those are solar, some of them are wind, etc. And then on top of that, even if you don't have anything that's related to renewable energy, if you can just show that you're 10% more efficient, the government is going to give you some more money. I call it Uncle Sugar, taking care of you, right? That's one of the positive deals. So what's the key point there? I said rural, wow, that went up. Rural America, right? Rural America. So if you're out in the countryside, or you're involved in husbandry or anything like that, taking care of animals, that kind of deal, you can qualify for this grant. And I know for a fact that there are multiple folks that are out there. They go out and buy 4, 5, 10 acres. They put some goats out there and they build whatever renewable infrastructure is there. And all of a sudden, you've dropped your cost per watt down astronomically, depending on what your initial cap investment is. And now your probability of success is significantly greater.
Alex?
Oh, I think it probably depends on what you're thinking about doing and where you're situated, both like within the US and outside of the US, because I can think of different models. I could think of the gridless model, for example, and I can imagine that they would probably be more interested in first going out there and talking and identifying which grids, mini hydro grids that are out there need an off taker. And then they might work backward from there to find the money to purchase the necessary infrastructure. And then I might think about what Marathon is doing. And I know that companies like Marathon, these public companies, don't necessarily go out and look for land or even for power. They look for a place to put their machines. So they may be coming out first with how much investment do I have behind me to go out and purchase the amount of machines that I need, and then where am I going to stick them? So I really think it probably depends on what your model is and what you're going for. That's going to decide whether you're going to start looking for power, land, or money.
Yeah, it's definitely fair to say that it depends on the circumstances, and they're absolutely all interconnected. To provide, I guess, concise feedback on my experience working with Bitcoin miners, the power cost tends to be the one that comes first when I'm helping them grow and evaluate growth strategies. Anytime I try and help make connections with, hey, you're looking at growing your Bitcoin mining facility. Here are some energy companies that I have been having conversations with about facilities that they have that are available. The number one question that I get back right away is what's the power cost?
Absolutely. So I wanted to open up the any opportunities for some questions here, but here's my final question, and we'll open it up for questions that you guys might have to ask our panelists here, because the business side of Bitcoin mining is a very broad theme. And so I want to end with my final question on a positive. We'll start with you, Margot. What are you most excited about in the future of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining? Cast us a spell. Cast us a vision. Tell us a narrative. What are you most excited about as you look out to the expanse of the Bitcoin mining world and the future of Bitcoin mining?
So as someone who doesn't have to worry about if I'm going to make money off of Bitcoin mining, what excites me the most is watching the halvings that come and what's going to happen with transaction fees and who's going to survive. So I'm so like,
You're a sadist.
yeah,
She's like, I like watching people suffer.
it's
Yeah.
it's a very special position. But other than that, I'm very interested in always, the second order effects of these economic pressures on Bitcoin miners, because I think it is from the like extraordinarily competitive nature of the market that pushes for the innovation that we see in this industry. And that, I think, for myself really excites me because I can start imagining all the cool ways Bitcoin mining will expand and integrate into, very maybe mundane aspects of life. Like we've already seeing, home heating, or like there's a startup in France that beautiful heaters, indoor heaters, and they're mining Bitcoin, and it's just, perfect. It's a wonderful way to decentralize a network, to just make these innocuous devices that mine Bitcoin and secure it. So for me, I think that's very exciting, very innovative, and I just don't see that happening in any other industry that requires that Bitcoin mining does. There's just like AI data centers don't have the same economic pressure. So they don't have to innovate that much, right? At least not yet, until maybe start feeling a little more pressure. So that to me is just really cool. It's a rare opportunity, and I feel really fortunate to be part of this industry at such an early stage.
I'm gonna respond with another Bitcoin miner told me. He said, if you choose the business of Bitcoin mining, you are literally choosing the industry that's on only one mode. It's hardcore mode, where everything wants to kill you and you only have one life. And I was like, "Come on, brother, that's pretty true, right? If you have a variable PPA, you gonna die, right? If the hash rate doesn't, you gonna die, right? If you don't have the right OpEx and burn rate, you gonna die. You're gonna shut them off. And there's so much against us. And I think what you talked about, Margot, and having grit and perseverance and having a long-term outlook is really important to, I think, to the persona of Bitcoin miners. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, my friend, what are you most excited about as you scan out to the future of Bitcoin mining?
So what excites me the most is there's an app called Clubhouse, and I used to speak on Clubhouse when I was taking my kids to school. And recently, not even a week ago, my youngest son, who's 12, asked me, "Hey, how does Bitcoin mining work?" That felt really good, knowing that we were coming here. And to give you context, my oldest son, I missed about like maybe 6 of his 8 years of life out on mission. You know what I mean? And so to come back home and find something other than basketball they're interested in and I'm interested in was outstanding. But then he took it up another notch. He asked me if he could come to the conference. It's like, nah, bud, you got to go to school. However, I promise to gather information, do what I can to make him a success, and invest in it. Because at the end of the day, whether you're using fiat or Bitcoin or Bitcoin, preferably Bitcoin, this is about improving your quality of life, right? You're investing in something that's going to go up in value, and at some point, you're going to trade that value in for an experience or a moment with your family, right? Or with those that you care about. And just remember that, it's larger than just electricity, the land, or the contracts, right? It also, we do all this so we can go back to the ones we love. And if you can get there, it's going to be fantastic. So yeah, my sons.
So I like that cut right to my heart, friend. Like the one word that I would use from what you've said is legacy. And so we can extrapolate out the hard work and effort that we do in the Bitcoin mining world as operators is establishing a legacy for our property and the ones that come behind us. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
I
There's
love
no
it.
doubt about it.
I love it.
Fantastic.
What are you most excited about for the future of Bitcoin mining?
My head first goes to Warren Buffett's quote, "You show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." And what excites me about Bitcoin mining is the incentive that it creates to enhance our electric grid. Now, we in the United States are doing pretty well, although our trajectory isn't fantastic when we consider the additional load that is already started and is coming with AI and electric cars and things like that we're not built out for. So we'll have our own issues and blackouts and brownouts and things like that. But in particular, as you start looking at other countries, third world countries, I think you mentioned, gridless in Africa, and they're literally lighting up cities and they're bringing electricity to cities that previously did not have electricity. And they never had it because there was not the incentive to go in and create the infrastructure. The money just wasn't there. Well, now when you have all of these areas, these remote areas that have the electricity that's there, you can actually go in, you can start monetizing it right away, and you can light up a city. And that's what really excites me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I wanted to open it up if any of you guys had questions. Yeah, let's go over here.
What should we be telling our representatives and how should we be presenting that information to them?
Sounds like something Margot should talk about.
I think, taking literature that's being produced by some of the industry organizations probably be helpful because it does break down, the facts about Bitcoin mining. That's probably helpful. But I think also just telling them what you're doing and how it benefits them and answering their questions, finding out where their misconceptions lie and trying to correct them And if you need data and evidence, you can always ask me, because that's my job, is to collect the data from the industry and try to put it out in a way that people can make use of. So yeah, I would say all of those things, and be friendly, and yeah, really try to meet them where they are.
Alex?
Yeah, one additional piece there is, in a lot of cases, this isn't everybody, but in a lot of cases, don't lead with Bitcoin. It's a data center. Don't lead with Bitcoin, because they come with their preconceived notions of what Bitcoin is. If you just describe it as a data center and can explain the benefits first, and then they start thinking about it and understanding it, and yes, it's Bitcoin, that comes at some point. But ultimately, what you want to avoid is the door just slamming in your face, even if not physically, but just mentally, they shut down when they hear Bitcoin. That you're going to have a big challenge.
Anything to add, Fredrick?
Take them to go see Dirty Coin. Isn't that the name of the movie?
Bitcoin, yeah.
Dirty
Coin.
coin.
I watched that movie a couple days ago in Washington D.C. with the I guess the producer, and it's fantastic. I think they're playing it here tonight. Yeah, come out and check it out, because you think they're coming from the left, but it's coming from a different direction, and you learn a whole lot of things that you didn't know. And the most dangerous person on the battlefield is a person that thinks they know, but it just isn't so. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
Just touching back there on the politics issue, do you believe the Democratic Party, is it politically feasible for them to be crypto friendly?
Yeah, it is. And there are organizations that have been working pretty heavily on trying to get a more positive narrative to come out of the Democratic Party. And from what I understand, there are politicians within the party who are trying very hard to find some kind of deal with Elizabeth Warren in particular, to try to shift the tone, because they recognize that this, crypto in general, they're not necessarily thinking about Bitcoin in the way that we think about it, but the policymakers in DC do understand that in general, this is a very new technology. It is a revolutionary technology, and they would be making a terrible mistake if they try to, put these really horrible restrictions on it. So I do know for a fact that there are people within the party who are trying to change this, but it really comes down to what are the compromises they're going to make. And really, we have to be careful. I think the industry has to be careful that these compromises, even if it makes it more friendly, still not benefit you in the way that you think of Bitcoin in particular, in terms of the type of financial freedom that you're looking for. So be mindful of positive legislation too, because there may still be this trade-off, especially in terms of the custody of Bitcoin and what that means. So on the one hand, yes, but it may only benefit everything but Bitcoin. So, I tried to be positive, and now I think that I'm coming around to this. It's not
So
positive.
what you're saying is that sometimes when policy and legislation comes down, there are hidden provisions in those.
Yeah.
Say it ain't so.
Say it ain't so.
Say it ain't so.
Down bill. Yeah, see, that's the other thing, is like, can they just water it down enough to make somebody like Elizabeth Warren, or particularly Elizabeth Warren, happy that it sounds like it could be bad, but actually it doesn't have any teeth. So
Would you also recommend people just email their congressmen and their local representatives and say, look, knucklehead, this is important?
yes, they should. I think, it's really important to put pressure on them, on the policymakers, because even though we really do have a very lopsided situation here in terms of, well, who policymakers listen to, they still do pay attention if you're loud and noisy and you promise not to vote for them in the next cycle, right? So I think that's been a big motivator even just now. But the thing that I think is still very concerning, and it really comes down to your freedom to transact in Bitcoin and to do that in any way that you want, I think is still a big concern in terms of what they will give, and not, the government has already shown that they're more concerned with being able to spy on you and to monitor those on-ramps, those financial on-ramps for, the four horsemen, right? So of the info apocalypse. So, for child pornography, terrorism, and so on, whatever the other two I forget. But they always come up with an excuse to find a way to regulate the internet, and Bitcoin is part of that. So I think we have to be mindful that the politicians may still always be in this contentious battle with the Bitcoin holders in terms of the type of financial freedom that we're looking for through Bitcoin.
I love it. Fredrick, Alex, any comments on that?
Yeah, I'd echo those thoughts and just caution that in most cases, I would venture to say, adding legislation ends up being a bad thing because it is going to be probably several hundred pages. They're going to have their AML and KYC provisions in there. When we care about privacy, they say, yeah, privacy is great, but that doesn't apply to us, right? We still have to see what's going on so that we can protect against these things. And so that stuff's gonna be really hard for either party, really, to have some legislation at the core. I know at the RNC, when they announced like some core tenets about like being able to self-custody and things like that. But when it comes down to brass tacks and trying to get legislation together, it's going to be really hard to get something that it just focuses on those core things, doesn't have all of the extraneous stuff that in hindsight is going to be additional restrictions.
Last word, final word.
Final word is my two co-panelists did an outstanding job, and they've answered the question sufficiently. I can't add anything to it.
Perfect. Well, I'm always a pragmatic person, so I'm going to give each a final word, and the final question is where should all of these people go to learn more about your world and the stuff that you guys are in? We'll start with Alex. Give us your details. And
I don't know if there's a lot of good legal resources, so hit me up and let's grab coffee or lunch is probably one. Or if you have an attorney you're working with, sit down and talk to them about just the business side of things. Ideally, they kind of understand this industry a little bit so they can speak the language and understand kind of what you're dealing with. There are some legal scholars in the industry like Joe Carlos-Air and such, but to my knowledge, most of them are more on the litigation side of things. And really a lot of the business stuff is there are some that are specific if you're negotiating a PPA or things like that, right? But a lot of the business stuff is just general business things. So going and learning about how to start a business generally, how to run and operate an efficient business from a legal perspective, those resources will still apply to, running a Bitcoin mining facility.
So for the solar part of what I do, if you go to the NAPCET, the North Atlantic Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, it's a mouthful. If you go there, there's a lot of information about how to integrate renewable energy into what you got going on and find good resources. Obviously, you can call your brother Google. It's always going to be there, right? Search engines and AI are taking over. And then for the crypto piece, got a small website called coolcryptoconvo.com that'll talk about the more difficult topics that you don't hear as much because we tend to be positive all the time about everything. And the goal will be to be positive, but also address those barriers to entry wherever they may come from, and then have the conversation and learn from each other so we can see how to work around them in a legal and ethical manner.
awesome. Margot.
Yeah, so all my policy reports are on the Bitcoin Policy Institute's website, btcpolicy.org, and I'm always available online via Twitter, Nostr, or Telegram, and I have the same username on all of them. So that's Jyn Urso, JYN_URSO, named after the character from Rogue One. So that was my NIM before I went public. I was anonymous for quite a while. So yeah, you feel free to send me a message, DM, and I'm usually pretty good about responding.
Thank you so much, Alex, Fredrick, and Margot. Give them a round of applause.